Hey there, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to show you a secret instrument that not a whole lot of people know about. It's an instrument that cannot be traded and might just be a surprise to at least some of you. Again, this is an instrument that cannot be traded, but it's a must-have to have on your charts if you want to trade NQ futures. In fact, I would never take a trade on NQ futures without getting a confirmation on this untradeable instrument first. And now I'm going to show you why. Let's get to it. Well, here's the big reveal. I call it the composite, and most people don't know that you can string instruments together like this inside Thinkorswim. Here I've chosen what I call the Big 8, not the Magnificent 7, because I add GOOG and GOOGL in separately because they're two completely separate instruments with different market caps, which make up the Alphabet Corporation. So take this string and type it into your ticker field and you'll get the following result. And there you have it. And believe me, algos used by the banks, institutions, and hedge funds will watch this just as closely as any other instrument. In fact, although I don't often trade NQ, I won't take any trades on NQ if I don't have convergence on not just Qs and NDX, but also this composite. Let me show you how I do it. So here we have NQ's trading action today, and I've opened up a bit of the pre-market to show you where the pre-market low is. And if you followed any of my videos, you know the lines and the levels that I track. If you haven't watched any of my videos, check down below in the notes and you'll see the basic 4 or 5 videos that you should watch to get a feel for the way I like to trade. But as we start out the day, you see that NQ started out of the gate at the cyan blue line, and it popped a little bit for a moment, and then it came down to VWAP, and then it started to degrade. And it started to degrade further, and started to degrade further, and then right in the middle of nowhere, it decided to bounce. Now, why did it decide to bounce there? It didn't necessarily have anything to do with action in the pre-market. So what was the reason for the bounce right there? And I'm going to show you. In fact, if you go to the Qs chart, you'll see that the market opened and Qs came down and tried to mount a bounce off of this purple pivot point here, and then went further down and actually went down through this weekly pivot support point and actually went down below it. So it didn't bounce on either one of these. Let's take a look at NDX. And NDX opened in exactly the same fashion. It came down to a pivot support line, tried to bounce and couldn't, and then went down further and tried to go to a previous day weekly support pivot and couldn't get down there, so it bounced right there. And we don't have an answer why until we look at the composite. And the composite gives us the answer. The composite came, opened the day, danced around, came down, came up to VWAP, came down, came up to VWAP, and then came down, and its precise pivot point of the day, no further, not down to this weekly support level pivot, but the exact pivot of the day is where NQ bounced on this day. And that happens all the time. You'll see some sort of action on NQ or Qs or NDX, and you won't know why one of those decided to reverse course until you take a look at the composite. Let's take a look at some other examples and some other things that you can look at where the composite will help you determine whether NASDAQ is going to be bullish or bearish. Now, on this particular day, let's take a look at 2 specific spots. First, this arrow right here, and then this arrow right here, and then compare it to the composite chart. When we look at the composite chart, we see that the composite has been putting in higher lows, and a higher low, and comes and bounces on the 100 SMA. Now, let's take a look at the NQ chart, which, just like the composite, NQ is rising, bouncing, putting in higher lows, higher lows, higher lows. But all of a sudden, here, in the middle of nowhere, NQ decides to make a bounce. And we have no idea why until we look at the composite. And that's when the composite bounced right on the 100 SMA. So let's take a look at that next arrow. That next arrow on NQ, again, is very indeterminate. There was a bounce here, and it went up and started to dance around, came down, went through the 100 SMA and the 100 EMA, and just sort of chopped around there for a while. And we really don't know why until we look at the composite, which is when the composite came down and bounced on its VWAP. And it danced there for a while and built up steam before running. And that's an interesting divergence there that you can also note, that this is actually a lower high, whereas on NQ it was not a lower high at all. It was exactly in the same area. But when the composite went down and put in a lower high but got held up on VWAP, you can make a logical conclusion, if you're trading NQ, that from this point it's most likely to run. And it did. Now the next two candles are a divergence too, but it's the other way around. On NQ came down to touch its intraday VWAP. It bounced there and came down and tried to run through its intraday VWAP again and put in a lower low right here. But if you look at the composite comes down at that exact same spot, touches the VWAP and intraday VWAP, and then bounces and tries to come back down again, but puts in a higher low. And there's your divergence that tells you that whereas NASDAQ is trying to push lower, the 8 most important instruments in all of the NASDAQ and in all of SPY are saying, no, we're not going to go lower, we're going to go higher, and that's the place we're going to do it. And this next situation is just like the last, where NASDAQ is trying to push lower. It's going beyond its intraday VWAP. And in the middle of nowhere, here and here, it bounces. And we don't know why until we look at the composite. And that's where the composite has come down, didn't even bounce on VWAP, ran and rolled over and found a place to bounce on the 200 EMA right here. And that's a higher low, a divergence with what was shown on NQ. And that would have provided you with a signal that you could comfortably get long there because the composite was going to go up. And here we have another day where NQ comes out of the gate and does a little bouncing and then a little rolling over, comes down and bounces off its half gap, the yellow dashed line, bounces there, comes down and bounces off of its VWAP, bounces there, comes down further, and at this point in time, I'm watching to see if NASDAQ is going to come down and pierce or bounce on this previous day close line, the gray dashed line here, or the 200 SMA on the 5-minute chart, which I've discussed before. This is a 1-minute chart. I display the 200 EMA and SMA. Here's the EMA. This is the SMA. On the 5-minute chart, and I display them on a 1-minute chart by setting the length to 1000. Anyway, as this is coming down, I'm eyeballing this area right here, and I'm saying, is it going to bounce here? Is it going to blow through here? I don't know. But it bounces right here in the middle of nowhere, goes up to a pivot point, and down puts in a higher low. Now let's take a look at what happened on the composite that showed us that this point right here was a great entry to take a long, aside from the fact that it's a bounce on half gap and VWAP. So here we have composite opening, rolling over, bouncing in the exact same fashion, rolling over, bouncing. Here's the 200 EMA, bouncing, bouncing, and then it comes down, 200 EMA, 200 SMA, and the composite's previous day close, the gray dashed line here. Now, if the composite had gone below this previous day close, I would have been instantaneously bearish no matter what NQ looked like to me. Because as we can already see of this chart versus the other chart, this chart is putting in a bit of a bearish divergence where NASDAQ was not. NASDAQ was putting in a higher low. So that made this a solid entry to take long. So I'm not quite done here. I want to show you one more day, but before I do, let me ask that if you feel like you've gotten anything out of this video, please take a moment right now and click the like button for me. It would really help out a lot. Also, if you're interested in seeing me live stream my trades, consider subscribing and being notified for when I start that. That is, if there's enough people who would want to see that. The way I look at it is that I can help myself by helping others at the same time. I mean, I would have to be extremely diligent about broadcasting what I think are A++ setups if I'm going to be held accountable by a group that's watching. Likewise, it would help keep me from playing fast and loose with my stop losses. So hopefully it'd be a win-win situation by helping you recognize the pinpoint entries that I see every day. So if you'd like to see that, leave me a message below and subscribe, and you'll be notified when I get that off the ground. Now let's take a look at this next day. This next day is interesting to me, not because I took the trade or would have taken the trade, because I typically don't like trading short on NASDAQ because it's very volatile, and when things are going down, they're going down like crazy. But on this particular day, we had the market rolling over, and it came down and it bounced right here, and I'm not entirely sure why, but it came up and it bounced up to this weekly pivot point right here, and then rolled over, tried to make it back up to that pivot point to retest it, and couldn't. Now, why would this area right here, especially if it was any closer to the 100 SMA or EMA right here, why would this have been an interesting short to take? And the answer is with the composite. If you look at the exact same day where the market rolled over and the composite came down to its weekly pivot point, the one in purple, and it danced here for a second, rolled over, ran back up to it, rolled over, tried to get back up to it, rolled over, and then did get back up to it and could not get above it, and it was in line with the 100 SMA. So going back to the NQ chart, that spot right there, because of the composite, might have been an interesting short to take. And obviously it would have been profitable had the trade been taken and the composite decided to go north of here, which would have caused NASDAQ to go higher. You would just stop out for a small loss. So here we are on the last day that I'm going to show you. And keep in mind that I've been showing you only NQ and the composite, but you should know that I'm at the exact same time I'm watching this, I'm watching Qs and NDX and both VIXs, VIX and VIX futures at the exact same time. And on all of them, I'm looking for convergences between indicators. So NDX might be bouncing on the 200 SMA from the 5-minute chart. NQ might be bouncing on a pivot point. Composite might be bouncing on VWAP. But once I get those common convergences there, I know that the algos are racking up points. And what I mean by that is that the algos are very smart but very dumb instruments. And what I mean by that is they don't think for themselves. They're given rules and they're given very strict instructions. When this instrument goes to this spot, whether it's VWAP or anything else, start a buy program. But it won't do it, it doesn't do it just on NQ. It does it on NQ, Qs, NDX, ES, SPY, SPX, the composite, and not only does it do it on all of those instruments at the same time, it does it on all of those instruments on the 1 minute time frame, and on the 5 minute time frame, and on the 15-minute time frame, and on, let's say, the 512 tick time frame. And so you might have 30 possible occurrences, and when an algo hits on 25 or 27 of them at the same time, they initiate a buying program or a selling program. So on this last particular day, this was really interesting to me because the NASDAQ chart and the composite chart really diverged and told a story. And so you see NASDAQ coming out of the gate and dancing up and down for a little while in a range and playing around with some different lines that we have. And then it blew down and it came down to its main weekly pivot and even went down further than that, down near this previous day close of the VWAP, which is the thick white dashed line. So if you're only looking at this part of the chart up until this point, you're thinking things are looking pretty bearish. Let's take a look at the composite. Wow. The composite was actually bullish out of the gate. It ran up, came back down to this 200 EMA, SMA area, VWAP, half gap, bounced there, came back down to VWAP, bounced, came back down to VWAP, and then the 100 EMA, trying to bounce higher, cannot, comes down to the 100 SMA, trying to bounce, cannot, comes down to the combination of the 200 EMA, SMA, tries to bounce, cannot get up over VWAP, and rolls once again down to this yellow dashed line, which is the day's half gap. But as you can see, it's putting in a huge bullish divergence as compared to the bearishness of NQ. And because these 8 instruments really drive the train, so to speak. I mean, the other 92 instruments in the NASDAQ 100, they sort of follow suit, but these are the instruments that really, really decide where the market is going to go. So when you see such huge divergences, this would have been a trade that I would be very, very interested in taking. When I'm seeing that giant divergence, giant bullish divergence on the composite, but NASDAQ coming down and reaching down, I probably would have waited to see if it touched this previous day close of the VWAP. Because in reality, this spot right here is in the middle of nowhere. So anyway, that is all I have for today. Thank you very much for watching. And if you enjoyed the video, please give me a like. And again, if you want to see me live stream, leave me a message below and maybe we'll get that started. Okay, thanks again. Have a great day.